Okay, today we're working on a friend of mine's clock. It's belonged to her mother. It's a nice little one-day clock. I'm going to clean it all up. I'm going to disassemble it, clean it all up, put it back together. It has a broken bellow. It's a Hubert Herr movement. First thing I had to do was remove the door. Now, a lot of times with these doors, they get stuck really bad. And that's what the slot is at the, I'm sorry, I had it turned around. That's what the slot is for the, at the top. You take a screwdriver, put it in here, and it'll pop out. But we're gonna, like I said, take out this movement, clean it, and put it all back together. First thing you got to do when working on a Cuckoo clock is to remove the hands. This particular hand is held into place by a nut. So we'll just remove that nut. When the clocks are sitting around for a while, you might have to take a pair of pliers. And that's what I had to do, was take a pair of pliers to loosen the nut. And make sure you don't want to break them. But remove the nut, put it into your container. And then this particular clock has an extra nut on it, which holds the minute hand down. So you take that off. This particular clock, you cannot adjust the minute hand. It has a square hole in it. A lot of the clocks have hands that you can adjust, but this one you cannot adjust. Remove the hour hand, which is friction tight. And then the next thing we have to do is to remove the chains in order to take out the movement. You have to take the chain links apart to remove the clips. So that's what I'm going to do. I use a pair of pliers, and I'll grab a link, and then I'll twist while holding the pliers. Twist the link, and it'll separate the chain link so you can remove it. And you want to retain all those parts. I wanted to mention that this particular clock, when you add the weight to it, I'm just gonna pull on the chain. It does actually work, and so it just needs a good cleaning and the bellow fixed. After you remove the chains, the next step in taking out a clock is to take out the bellows. This particular bellow has screws on both sides. You remove the screws, and then you would take a flat screwdriver and pry on the bellows, and they'll pop out. Have the screw removed, and like I said, you put your screwdriver in behind the bellow, and it'll pop out. If it's glued in there, you'll have to take a Sharpie extracto knife and cut along the edges, and carefully. This takes a lot of patience, cutting along the edges with a knife and popping it loose. If you are patient, you can get it loose without breaking the bellow. If you break the bellow, you might have to replace it depending on the damage. If it's not too much damage, you can put it back together and it will still cuckoo, make its noise. Once you got the bellow apart from the wall, you have to remove it from the arm, the lift arm. And unfortunately, in this particular case, I did not have to open up this wire to remove it. And if you watch my other videos, I will use a rubber band to keep all these parts together. I got a rubber band around the lift wire. That way I know that that lift wire goes with that bellow. And put that in my box. Now I have to remove the screws on the other side. Once you have that bellow removed, now you have to take out the movement itself. It's held into place by 4 screws. And so we'll take those screws out to remove the movement. But before you can take the movement out, you have to release the cuckoo from the door. So the easiest way for me is to grab a hold of the wire and bend it at a 90-degree angle. You can use a pair of pliers to do this, but for me it's easy using my fingers. Once it's at a 90-degree angle, you just remove the wire from the door. Again, you don't want to use too much force. There's like a staple that holds the wire in. You can push that if it's loose. There's like a bigger staple that holds the door onto the clock. You can push down to make sure that those staples are in the clock. But take the wire off the door. And the cuckoo will fall inside. Now this wire right here, there's a lot of controversy on it. Some people just say it's a shipping wire to keep the door closed in shipping. I believe that it's a wire to make the clock silent at night in case you don't want to hear the cuckoo. A lot of people say, no, if you do that, it'll damage your clock. I disagree. Again, we're going to take a screwdriver and take out the 4 screws. Now my screwdrivers are magnetic. That way when I take out the screws, I can get them out of the box. Now I'm trying to do this and record at the same time. So a lot of the stuff I'll have to do off camera. But I will explain to you what I'm doing if I have to do anything off camera. So I'm going to remove the other 2 screws off camera. Before I finish removing all the screws, this pendulum leader wire, which is what the pendulum hangs onto, I take that off. For me, it's a lot easier to take the movement out of the clock because you're not struggling because you have the cuckoo attached. You're not struggling moving the movement up and out to get the movement out. Plus, in doing so, if you bend this crutch and the clock was already in sync, you'll have to mess with the crutch trying to get the clock back in beat. And again, that's why I removed the pendulum leader wire. And all you have to do is pry this tab apart with a flat screwdriver. I'm going to go ahead and do that now. In order to take that pendulum leader apart, you'd want to pull straight down on it while you're bending the tab where it holds. This way, you're not going to bend the crutch when you remove the pendulum leader. Once it's removed, you can pull it out of the way. It works a lot easier pulling it toward the clock. So the pendulum leader is out of the way. And then I just have one last screw that I have to take out in order to get the clock out. The screw is out. Now I can remove the clock from the case. Again, if I had that pendulum leader on there, I'd be struggling to take this movement out of the case. Once the movement is out of the case, now it's a good time to clean the case itself, the insides. And again, I use Old English oil to do that. My covers came off of my oil, but I'll shine all my antiques up with Old English oil. It works really well. I use the same rag every time I clean an antique or a movement. That way the rag is saturated with the Old English oil, so it helps me for other reasons. You'll notice I have a towel laid down on my table. If you watch the previous videos, this towel is to help when you're taking the movement out of the clock. You got the clock on the towel. You're not going to damage the front of the clock as long as you have it on something soft like a towel. But the towel also helps you find your parts, helps your parts prevent from bouncing around. If you just was to work on your clock just on a table, the parts will bounce around as you're removed. When you're on a towel, like I have it folded up, they don't bounce around as much. The towel helps you prevent from searching for your parts. Every once in a while, I will search for a part, especially when I'm working on the eclipse that hold the movement together. And so I'll sweep my floors several times looking for eclipse screws. Putting the towel on your table helps prevent from searching for parts. Again, I use a piece of plumbing material to work on my clocks. A roll of duct tape, a roll of masking tape will help serve that purpose. But I just use a piece of plumbing material. The movement fits down into the plumbing material really well. And you got two sides in this particular case. So it depends on what you want to do, on which side you want to use. Working on Cuckoo clocks, you're going to need a few things. You're going to need both a flat tip screwdriver and a Phillips tip screwdriver, depending on your clock. You're going to need a pair of needle nose pliers, um, a, a pair of tweezers, a container to put your clock parts in. Uh, you're going to need to be able to clean this clock. And at the least, use Dawn dish detergent to clean all the clock. You're going to need some toothpicks to clean the pivot holes. Even if you use an ultrasonic cleaner, I highly suggest using toothpicks to clean the pivot holes afterwards, because the ultrasonic cleaners do a really good job, but they don't do the best job. It's like a dishwasher. You have to pre-wash your dishes prior to using the dishwasher, and you can use the toothpicks prior to putting in the ultrasonic cleaner, just like you would your dishes, to pre-wash your dishes. Or I use them afterwards once they get out of the ultrasonic cleaner. And I just have a piece of 2x4 that got a bunch of holes drilled in that I use to put all my tools in. If you don't have an ultrasonic cleaner, like I said, you would still want to take the movement apart and clean the movement. A lot of people just dip the movement into a cleaning solution. I don't agree with that, because the pivots don't get cleaned that well if you just dip the movement into a cleaning solution. And you don't want to dip the movement in to the cleaning solution with your bird attached to it. So go ahead and disassemble your bird. It just takes a screw to disassemble the bird. There are several different types of birds. This particular bird that came out of the movement has a metal base. These are the better type of birds, the birds that are newer. Um, if they have a plastic base, like this bird, when you go to put them in the clock, and after time, the base will break. I have tried to super glue them, and you think everything is good to go. You tighten it back onto the bird rod, and the base will break. It's a lot easier just to go out and purchase a new bird versus trying to repair these things, because I have been unsuccessful in doing so. Older cuckoo clocks have wooden birds with movable wings. And when you have a bird that has movable wings and that is wooden, it's an old clock. According to my cuckoo clock repair guide, the removable wings was one of the first things that they did away with as they modernized cuckoo clocks. There are plastic cuckoo clocks with movable wings, but they're newer, and they were made in Japan or China or some foreign country. But the older cuckoo clocks are wooden with movable wings and movable tongues. And that's when you know you have an older clock. Like I said before, this clock was functioning, but it's dirty. The prior to taking the clock apart, you want to do a function test. 1-day clocks have a great wheel, a second wheel, and the third wheel, which is the escape wheel. 8-day clocks have a great wheel, a second wheel, the third wheel, and the fourth wheel being the escape wheel in the cuckoo clock. But you would take the great wheel and apply pressure and see if the clock is functioning. Like I said, this one was functioning prior to taking it out of the movement, but it is dirty. And if you can't move it with the great wheel, you would do it with the second wheel, apply pressure, and put the second wheel back and forth. And you can see that in this particular case, the third wheel, which is the escape wheel, the pivot has movement back and forth. I have found with 1-day clocks, you can have some play and the clock will still function properly. I am not an expert in repairing pivots, so I'm not going to replace this pivot. But you would do the same thing on the strike side of the clock. Take the great wheel and do a function test. In order to do a function test, you have to lift up this locking lever right here to allow this particular clock's got a rack and snail on it. This being the rack, which allows the cuckoo, and this being the snail, which is around the minute arbor hand. The rack has got a tab, this tab right here, that when it falls onto the snail that has designated areas for the time. If this tab is not bent properly, it will go down past the snail, and your clock will continue to cuckoo. It won't function properly. So anyway, to do a function test, you lift up this locking lever, and it's going to catch all these teeth. This cam arbor has got a wire on it that when you rotate the great wheel, that cam arbor is going to spin, and it's going to catch the levers, which releases this lever. The third wheel on the time side has got a pin on it. This lever here catches that pin when it stops the cuckoo. And so in this process, it is being missed by that pin until the time raises, bird cuckoos, and when it is done, the cuckoo arm is going to swing back. And so that's what everything that we're looking for is, to make sure that it all functions properly. And there the cuckoo arm did swing back when it was all done. And then this tab is now underneath the rack on the rack and snail movement. The reason why they call this the rack and snail movement, because this rack looks like some kind of rack, but this part right here looks like a conifer snail. So the function test is done. Everything is working. So now we can start disassembling the cloth. What you have to do first is take the rack and snail off. Now the rack has got E-clips that you will want to take off. And I use a screwdriver and I push it toward the E-clip. Push the E-clip away from everything. And then I'll take a needle nose pair of pliers and pull it out of the way. And you have to do the same thing here. Once you get the E-clip out of the way, and this is the E-clip here, and they're extremely tiny. I use magnetic tools. It helps me keep track of everything. Those E-clips are extremely tiny, and you want to be really slow. And that's, again, why I use a towel to help me with removing parts. I got the E-clip out of the way on the rack, so I can take that off. And you have to take the E-clip away on the minute wheel, minute pinion, which is what this little white plastic piece is called. And again, taking a pair of tweezers and a screwdriver, you could pop that out. I'm going to do it off camera. You're not going to be able to see anything anyway, because my hands are in the way. Once you get the E-clip off the minute pinion, you can take the rack off. Now this rack is held into place by this washer that's on top of the minute pinion. That's the only purpose behind this washer, is to hold this rack into place. So remove the washer and the rack will come off. Minute pinion will come off. The next thing we have to do is take the rack stop lever off, which is this part right here, and the lift rack lever off, which is this part right here. The purpose behind the lift lever is whenever the hour, the minute, sorry, I'm stopping to get you proper names for these parts. The medicine I take, I have trouble remembering and finding the words, but this is the minute. This is the minute hand arbor with center wheel. Whenever it rotates on the half hour and the hour, the little tabs will lift the cam lock lever. The little tabs will lift the lift lock lever, which in return will lift this lever and this tab right here out of the way from the third wheel on the strike side, which I told you has that pin that catches this tab to stop the cuckoo whenever it's done doing its thing. But in order to get the rack stop lever and which is this, and the lift lock lever, which is this, off, you have to take the E-clips out. And this particular clock has got E-clips, and you have which are behind this plate on both items, here and here. There's an E-clip there. I don't know if you can see it. But anyway, you have to take the E-clips off. Some clocks have a friction clip that would be on this side of the clock, the back side of the clock. And these friction clips are really a pain to get off. They again, they're friction clips. What I do is I will put the movement inside my plumbing fixture, and then I'll take a ball peen hammer and I'll hit on this rod here, and that will push the friction clip up enough to where I could take a pair of needle nose pliers and pull it off. And when you do that, you want to make sure that the rack stop lever or lift lock lever is out of the way from everything so you don't damage it if you were going to hit on it. I don't know how they put those on. I think they use some kind of a special tool. But in this case, it has E-clips. And I'm going to go ahead and take those off now, off camera. Once you have the E-clips out of the way, you could pull the rack stop lever and the lift lock lever off the movement. Because this is the Hubert Herr movement, it has this piece right here that's part of the strike side. It also has an E-clip that you have to take off in order to take the plates off. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. And by the way, according to the Cuckoo Clock Repair Guide, every 1 day movement for the Hubert Herr takes 320 grams of weight. Every 8 day movement takes 1,500 grams of weight. And I refer to this guide quite a bit. I hope this isn't an infringement of the of his copyrights, but this book tells you quite a bit of stuff, and I like referring to it to get the name of the parts and what size weights to use. So I'm going to go ahead and take that E-clip off for that part.